Señoras y señores.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Exchange and Cooperation Center for Latin America, an international organization which is an advisory body at ECOSOC with UNCTAD and the WIPO as well, I would like to give my greetings to this assembly. The report from the Director General on Jobs, Rights and Growth, Reinforcing the Connection, reminds us that the future of work will only be sustainable if we take into account the connection between high-quality work, respect for fundamental rights, and inclusive growth. We have been able to see how exposed all economies are to crises, be they health crises, environmental, or geopolitical. In these circumstances, it's employment, above all, precarious employment or informal employment, which suffers from the impacts in the most direct way. Nevertheless, the solution cannot only be in economic growth, because what we need are political and collective decisions to strengthen social justice via decent work. Workers have lost trust in their institutions. There is doubt and a crisis of trust, which is not only a consequence of the economic inequality, but it's also a direct threat for social cohesion and for democracy. Social justice has seriously worsened in the last few years. The connection between employment, rights, and economic growth has stopped turning into formal work and decent work, but rather it's exacerbated precariousness and informality. Representatives, in this context, what has been the situation in Latin America? The region has seen low growth over the last few years, an area that some have called a lost decade. There was a publication called the 2024 Labor Panorama, Latin America and the Caribbean, which points out that it seems that the region will have grown on an average annual rate of 1% between 2015 and 2024, which is a stagnation of the GDP per capita in that period. And it's a growth rate which is much below the annual average of approximately 3% that we saw between 1990 and 2010. In such a context, we have seen an alarming backsliding in trade union freedom and in collective bargaining, with an increasing trend towards inequality and precariousness in working conditions, the most vulnerable sectors of society. Growth must not be considered an end in and of itself. It must be evaluated in its ability to create decent work, to guarantee equality, and to help in progressing towards more fundamental human rights in the world of work. Trade union freedom, the right to collective bargaining, equal access to employment are not just sectoral demands. They are pillars of a social order which is both democratic and stable in nature. Dear representatives, what are the things that must be taken into account now if we want to reduce the inequalities in the different global economies? First of all, the technological revolution must be taken into account, in particular, artificial intelligence. The fear that many people have is that artificial intelligence will destroy jobs. Yes, this risk exists. However, we must not generalize. According to estimates from the ILO, the effect of the increase that could be produced by generative AI, that is to say, when it is a complement to work carried out via optimization of just some tasks, is 6 times greater than its automating effect when it completely replaces jobs altogether. That is, 3.3% of global job is exposed to the risk of being completely automized, whereas 20.5% of jobs could actually see themselves strengthened thanks to AI. Moreover, depending on the assignment being carried out, some professions, in particular administrative work, are much more vulnerable to automation than others. Second, there's the demographic transformation that we can see with a high unemployment rate amongst young people and an aging population. This affects productivity. And then third, there's the climate crisis, whose most extreme effects are a threat to the global labor force. Representatives, we believe that this transformation and these different crises has to be a priority of states, international organizations, as well as companies and civil society. This would engender trust in institutions, leading to employment, labor rights, and economic growth, which in turn would foster social justice. Thank you very much.